Go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our discussion that probably nobody wants to have, but everybody should have. So today we're talking about the unforeseen parenting plot twist and ways that we need to be prepared for. So I am here with Dan Pakin from Strategies from Wealth. Say hi, Dan.
Hi, Nat.
Well, Tempest Financial. Hi, how are you? Yes, that's
Yeah.
called muscle memory, is really what that was.
Way back when it was Strategies, now it's Tempest. Yep.
Someday. That's it. I got used to so many things. But for all of you that are here, thank you so much for joining us. Dan's got a lot to talk to us about, but I want to let you know the way that this goes is that we are both here for you. So if you have questions, just pop them in the chat, raise your hand, we'll take you off mute. That's all that we need to do. But ultimately, one of the things that I realized from many, many years ago was that we do need some kind of protection. And I remember that when I started thinking about this, truthfully, my 20s were about 7 years old. And I went to a baby show in Manhattan, and Dan was there. And I basically ran up to Dan in a panic because I felt that at 7 years old, with my 20s being 7, that I was already late to the game. That these are things that I should have done way before. And I had literally nothing prepared. We had no life insurance, we had no will. We basically were getting a handle on just being twin parents. I feel like it took me that long, yes guys, 7 years, to get into the groove of things. But once I did, and once we realized that this was a really important thing to both my husband and I, we really wanted to make sure that we did have all of our ducks in a row. So meeting Dan was very fortuitous. Yes, I probably should not have assaulted him and jumped him and asked 27,000 questions at the same time, but I'm glad that I did. And so I've been working with Dan this whole time. So poof, that's a minute. And maybe the kids were even younger than 7, Dan, now that I'm thinking about it. But
It's
or maybe
it's 13
yeah.
years, maybe 14.
Oh, I'm getting old. But yeah, so I wanted to make sure that Dan was here, not only for Nat and the Diaz family, but for our Twiniversity family as a whole. So if you guys have any questions, you just let us know and put it up in the chat. But Dan, I turn it over to you because I know that we really do need your help in getting prepared for all the adult stuff that we may not have in order yet.
Yeah, thanks, Nat. And it's been a while. We've been working together for, I think it's 14 years, and love it. Have spoken at Twiniversity classes all that time, helped a lot of parents of twins, expectant parents of twins. They've become great clients of mine. They become good friends of mine, many of them. So I love doing this. It's an impactful time for many of you. It's a time when the conversations I have can make a big impact on your lives. So I will keep coming back and keep speaking as long as you'll have me. Happy to be here. And yeah, so we're talking about life insurance and wills today, which not the most exciting stuff, but really important. And kind of like what you said, sometimes it's something that people often put on the back burner. So important to talk about this, learn about it, get educated, and just make sure you're doing the right thing here.
So where do we begin, Dan, right? Regardless of whether you are currently pregnant with twinnies or if you have a few things in place, but you're not really sure, where do we begin? Because honestly, it really is overwhelming. And I remember the first time that we sat down with you, not that I felt like I was being called into the principal's office, but I really did feel very unprepared for all the things that I truthfully hadn't done. And Dan, you could be very honest with everybody too. Like you could be like, Nat was a hot mess and she told me that she couldn't save any money. Like I'm fine with just being full disclosure because I know that what I didn't know, I bet you the majority of people don't either. So feeling that overwhelmed feeling of how do we start this? What do we do? What are the things that we need? How do we start that conversation? Do we start with our partner? Do we go to a professional first? What do I do, Dan? How do we begin this?
Yeah. Well, this is the right place to start. And what I mean by that is in building a financial plan, you sort of want to build the moat first, right? Your plan is the castle, you build the moat, that's protection.
Okay.
So you know, philosophically, I help people with a lot of different things in finances, investing and planning for college, all those things. But with every one of my clients, the first place I start is making sure they're properly protected. Okay.
Mhm.
And that's things like property and casualty insurance. That's like your homeowners, your auto insurance, disability insurance, but also your wills and legal documents and life insurance.
Yeah.
So from there, we talk about saving and investing. But the reason protection is first is you could have the greatest investment strategy in the world.
Mhm.
But if something goes wrong, if you're diagnosed with something, if you get hit by a bus, something, all of that is out the window, right? So
Yes.
protection has to be first. But, you know, look, when it comes to this, I encourage everyone to work with somebody. When it comes to financial products, you Google this stuff, you're going to get 1,000 articles
Yeah.
for something, against something. It's very hard to do this. So important to work with somebody. And my recommendation, work with somebody who is a macro financial planner. This
What
is
does that
somebody,
mean? What is
it,
what
mean,
is
it means the really, before we even talk about protection, you have somebody has to get an understanding of your financial situation
Mhm.
and your life situation.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like when you go to a doctor and you know they kind of tell you what to do without taking an X-ray. No, they need to take an X-ray first. Need to understand where everything is. Ask a lot of questions. Get an understanding of your situation. From there, they can start talking about, okay, well, here's how we protect life insurance. Here's the amounts. Here's the types. Here's what's appropriate for you in your situation.
Mhm.
Um, so, you know, that's really where you start is working with somebody, having them understand your financial situation,
Yeah.
understanding their philosophy, making sure it's aligned with you, but certainly a protection first philosophy is what I would say.
Okay, so we find somebody in our area, or could anybody in the country or anybody in the world call you, or is it geographically specific?
I work with people all over the country now,
Okay.
especially with Zoom. You know,
Yeah.
it's been good for my business. Allows me to work with people. It's just, you know, time change is just what we have to deal with.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm licensed in almost every state, so I work with people all over.
Okay. Okay. So once we have our sit down with you, whether it's Zoom or whatever, for that first meeting, is there anything we need to bring with us?
Well, you need to certainly, the first meeting is always just a conversation. And from there, we would set up a Zoom meeting. And at that meeting, I want to get an understanding of your finances. So, at the very least, have a good understanding of your account values, where
Okay.
everything's at, want to understand your group benefits, what's your auto insurance liability limits, all of those things. And at that point, we're going to have a good understanding of your financial picture, really every financial decision you've made in your life up to that point.
Yeah.
And from there, we start with protection. So we'll start talking about how do you set up your auto insurance? How do you
Yeah.
set up your homeowner's insurance? What's your disability through work? But also, we're going to talk about creating a will, what's important to know about creating a will, life
Mhm.
insurance. Let's figure out what's the right amount to have, what are the types, and we go from there.
So we don't have to get too stressed about having that first meeting, but you cannot help us figure out what we need until you know what we have,
Yeah, I
in a
mean,
nutshell.
uh, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So, right, it's getting an understanding. Like I
Okay.
said, it's a doctor. You know,
Okay.
doctors don't just give advice; they have to ask questions first.
I don't know. It depends on your doctor. I feel like
Again,
if it's my Zoom Chinese street doctor that I like to go to with the kids sometimes. I don't think he asks many questions. By the way, that's a real thing. Remind me to show you next time you're in my neighborhood. All right. So if we sit down and we start talking about protection, right, of building that moat, what does that mean? Am I protecting myself? Am I protecting my home? Am I protecting my children? What do you mean by we have to start with protection?
okay. Well, let's just talk about life insurance, since I think that
Okay.
that's you know, will is closely associated with life insurance, right? Because part of life insurance is making sure there's enough money there if something
Mhm.
goes wrong. Will would then dictate, well, how does that money get distributed? So life insurance, again, it depends on your situation, but you know, I am on the belief that most people should own life insurance. Either there's a need to have it now, or there'll be a need to have it in the future. But certainly anyone who has dependents who are relying on them,
Yeah.
anybody who has liabilities, anybody who contributes to a family, anyone who contributes to an organization, anyone who really contributes to the world, or will contribute in the future, is somebody who should own life insurance. You're basically protecting the value, the economic benefit that you can provide with a lump sum amount if something should happen to you.
So
Right. And that's
one of the things that I've learned with you was that, honestly, Dan, I'm going to tell you, I really did not know that there were two different types of life insurance, right? Well, technically is there three? There's really two, but then you get one through work. But like, I remember when we sat down and we were going through all the things that maybe we should consider, you brought up these two different types of life insurance, and it probably is common knowledge for everybody out there, but I did not have parents that were, I don't want to say that they were financially irresponsible. I think they did their best for what they knew for the time that they lived in. I think now we know better. And for all the people that are coming to Twiniversity, they clearly want to know better, hence why they're even seeking more information about, whether it's parenting hacks or schedules or whatever. The people that are part of Twiniversity, we typically want to do better. So when we were talking about life insurance, we were talking about what may be best for me, what may be best for my husband. And we had this kind of big discussion. And I was always like, I really didn't know that life insurance could also be considered part of your investment and retirement strategy technically. So could you tell us about the two different types of life insurance policies that exist? And how do we go from there figuring out what's best for us?
Yeah. So when it comes to life insurance, I always say there's two basic questions: is what's the right amount to have, and what is the type that I should have? I'm going to get to types, but I don't want to skip over amount, because that's always where I start. And it's really the more important one for now, because certainly if you have children, if you have people who are dependent on you, we need to figure out, well, what's the right amount of coverage to have? And there's different ways to approach that. Very commonly is a needs analysis, where you can go through it and look at, oh, well, I've got two kids and college is going to cost this. And then if this happens, but my wife will keep working or my husband will keep working, all of those analyses are wrong. Like it is impossible to calculate exactly what you would need in that situation. I think also people often think about, oh, life insurance, I'll get hit by a bus and I'll be dead the next day. It doesn't always work that way. You could be diagnosed with something. You could have 3 years left to live. What's happening in those 3 years? Are you doing more things with your family, spending more money during that time? Is there experimental treatment that isn't covered by insurance that you want to have? There's all kinds of factors of, who knows what's college going to cost in 18 years? Can we really know that? What's your need? All of those things. I always start from an optimal perspective, which is an understanding of what's available to you. And really the amount of life insurance that is available to you is based on income mainly, right? So life insurance is insurance. It's meant to replace something. So you have car insurance to replace your car, homeowner's insurance to replace your home. Life insurance, well, what are you replacing? You're replacing income. And the same way, if you had like a $50,000 car, you couldn't get auto insurance on it for $75,000. If you have $1 million home, you can't get homeowners insurance for $2 million. So how do you determine what you're eligible for? So there are rules. And within the realm of life insurance, you are eligible for 30 times your income if you are under the age of 40. That's the most life insurance you can get. So you can't actually get more than that. So if you wanted a $20 million life insurance policy, you're willing to pay for it, you actually can't get it. You have to qualify for it with your income. After that, from age 40 to 50, you're eligible for 20 times your income. Then it's 15 times. And once you're in your 60s and 70s, it's about 1 times net worth.
Okay.
So that's what's optimal. And, the question is, well, how much of your value, of your worth do you want to be insured? Right? I always say, like, a great example of it is you know, if your spouse was walking across the street and a Budweiser truck, who maybe the driver was like dipping into, you know, the back the items in the back of the truck, and he takes out your husband and he's not there anymore. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to sue Budweiser.
Mhm.
And how much are you going to sue Budweiser for? Everything that he's worth, right? Everything that he's worth. This guy was making $100,000. He was going to work for 30 more years, all that other stuff. That's what I'm suing him for, right? But if there is no Budweiser truck and you walk across the street and you have an aneurysm and you're gone, well, now how much do you want, right? So that's what we're replacing is income, right?
Okay.
So that's the main way to think. Now, I'll also just say before we move on to types, what about non-working spouses? What about wives or husbands who maybe are stay at home? Should they have life insurance? Absolutely, they should. Just because maybe they're not contributing economically, you know, tell a mom that she's not contributing to the family. She contributes a whole lot, as you know.
Mhm.
So how do we determine what she should have? So a non-working spouse or even a working spouse is always eligible for their amount, 30 or 20%, or
Okay.
50% of what the working spouse has or is eligible for. Okay. So
Okay.
if a husband is eligible for $3 million, the non-working spouse would be available $1.5 million.
Still a
Okay.
little crappy though. I do want to go on the record and
It allows you
say,
to, if you do the calculation of like how much money you'll get over your
yeah,
working life, it comes short, right? But it's the best you can do, right? And that's what it is. It's a present day value of
yeah,
replacing all of the paychecks that would have gone to your family over those years. That's essentially what life insurance is.
that's interesting. I didn't
So,
realize that. So now once you figured out this calculation, like I think it makes total sense to get the max, obviously, right? Of that, what we'd be eligible for. So now, once we know whatever that number is based on income, et cetera, one of the questions that I personally have is you said before, and I don't know the answer to this. Are we eligible to get more life insurance if we have more kids? Right. So like everybody in Twiniversity has two, but what if we have like 13 kids? It does not matter.
it's based on your income. And that's what I'm saying. Like there's no exact science to this. A lot of this is going to depend on, well, how much money do you make? What are your
Yeah.
liabilities? How many kids do you have? What is your age? What is your income potential?
Yeah.
All of these factors. I mean, look, I want to try and get the most insurance for the least amount of outlay. That's
Yeah.
my job. So, you know, a lot of this is let's figure out, let's try and get you the best health rating because that'll affect the cost. We
Mhm.
could look at different companies. Different companies will have different rates. Um, Also, like you can ladder policies. So we'll talk about term insurance, but you can get them in different durations. You can get a 10-year term, a 20-year term, you can get a 30-year term. So if we say, hey, the amount I want to get is $4 million, we
Mhm.
can try and do, well, maybe we'll do some in 20-year, we'll do some in 10-year. That's a way to get the right amount in place, but we can lower the cost a little bit. But what's most important is getting that amount in place while you're
Okay.
young and healthy and you have that.
Now, you have been able to get our family's life insurance during pregnancy, correct? Because there was this kind of, I don't know if it was an old wives' tale or just misinformation that was spread, but for a long time, like a lot of Twiniversity families thought that we weren't insurable during pregnancy. So regardless, is there any period of time in our life that maybe we wouldn't want to start that health grade or anything like that?
No, there isn't. So, um, if anything, our health typically gets worse as we get older. So you know, you want to get this when you're young and healthy
Yeah.
because things go wrong. You know, I can tell you doing this for 17 years now, it's happening. I've had clients, breast cancer. I've had congenital heart disease, other heart issues, blood disorders. These
Mhm.
things happen. People, you know, there's something, everybody loses their insurability one day. There comes a point where you can't get life insurance, whether you like it or not. That day happens for everyone. So you want to lock this in
Okay.
when you're healthy. Life insurance is something when you need it, you can't get it. So the
Mhm.
time to get it is when you don't need it. As far as expectant pregnancies with twins, um, you can certainly get it. You can get it in the third trimester. The only issues ever, a couple things come up: gestational diabetes. It's not a decline. They just wait until after the babies are born. And what I would say, it still makes sense to go through the process, because
Mhm.
really all we have to do is show that postpartum checkup and show you're fine, and they automatically approve you.
Okay.
Preeclampsia is another one that they pause on, and one or two other things. But most of the time, we have no issues, and you can get it. And like I said, it doesn't affect the health rating at all. If anything, they know this is because you're pregnant,
Okay.
and they just will pause it until after the babies were born, but only for those situations.
Okay. All right. So there's no time that we should like press pause on this conversation, right?
No.
So we just had a question and it said, what are some of the biggest health conditions that might make getting life insurance difficult? So like, is there like, if you had a heart attack, you're out. If you had a brain tumor, don't even apply. Like, are there big medical issues that would prevent an insurance company from saying absolutely not?
Um, yes, of course. Cancer is obviously, but it depends. When did you get the cancer? What type of cancer?
Mhm.
Have you been in remission? Heart disease, all those things. There's a big depends with all of these things. And, like the way it works is when you get life insurance, the insurance company is on the hook. They're basically saying, we're going to give $1 million if you die. So they need to do a health assessment on you. They're going to go to your doctors. There might be an exam, but they're going to come back and give you a health rating.
Mhm.
That health rating will be something like preferred plus, preferred, standard, and substandard. So all of those factors are going to go into what you can get for life insurance. So if you have some health issues,
Mhm.
doesn't mean you're not going to get life insurance. It just means you get a lower health rating,
Yeah.
which affects the premium of what you'll pay. So yeah, those are the big factors. I mean, a big factor is tobacco use, right? So smoking is not good, right? You can get life insurance. You're just going to get a smoker rating, which is, if you could avoid that, you want to avoid it. So it's tobacco use, it's smoking, it's vaping, all of those things.
Yeah.
You want to avoid that for a couple years if you can.
How many years? Like 5, 2, 1?
They'll ask about 5 years in the
Okay.
question is what they'll ask you. There's tricks to that, but that's a conversation I could have with whoever I'm working with, but that's sort of the rule.
Okay. All right. So now we know kind of of what the maximum that we could get, which by the way, I love that there is always a loophole with multiple policies. And I know that we've discussed that before. It's so intriguing. But I will say personally for everybody that's watching, I regret not doing it sooner because had I done this like before my pregnancy, I had preeclampsia during my pregnancy. I've had high blood pressure since I delivered my babies. Like I always think that it's so important to get it as soon as possible. And just to tell you, like, I'm very honest with you guys, but like I've already tried to get it for my kids. One kid had one of my twins, my baby B already has it. And that was the big part of my thinking was let's start this and get the lowest kind of, not deductible, but the lowest amount that I'm going to have to pay because his health is so good. And I just think that it was important to do that. And so for that, we did do the whole life. So he could build up kind of this money and use it for other things. So I do want to talk about that, about the two different types of life insurances that are available to you. But before we get to that, I think it's really important to talk about the difference between people who have policies through work and people who have policies personal. So we've discussed this multiple times, and Dan and I, unfortunately, have been involved with quite a few Twiniversity families that have had fairly catastrophic life events that have occurred. And
Yeah.
it's very, very sad to me. But when I was younger and I had a job and I had life insurance, I, for whatever reason, just thought that, like, oh, I have life insurance now. I didn't realize that the life insurance was really dependent on that specific job. So could you talk a little bit about that and what happens with that type of policy and how it works when you have something through your employer?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a it's a good time to tell the story that I tell at every Twiniversity, and you know this because we
Yeah.
went through this. I'll say his name because it's a way to honor his name, Michael Burkhart. This happened, I think we were working for 2 years, so this happened almost 11 years ago now.
Yep.
Um, a couple that was at Twiniversity expecting twins, husband was diagnosed with brain cancer while they were pregnant. Great guy, very nice guy. And you're very limited as to what you can do and how you help somebody when they have a diagnosis like that.
Yeah.
So we helped them as best we could. He passed away about 2 years after the babies were born. It was traumatic. We went through that. We had conversations with the surviving spouse, the family. It was very real. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've worked together for so long, is going through that together.
Yeah.
So it can happen. And what did he have? All he had was group life insurance. And many people think, well, I have this through work. That's one of my benefits through work. I almost always encourage people to get an individual policy besides work. Here's what you need to know about work. First of all, the amount of coverage is usually limited, right? It's just so much you can get. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 times salary. Sometimes there's supplemental that you can opt into.
Yeah.
It's not portable. So if ever you leave that job, it doesn't go with you, right? It's also the company's discretion. So they could not offer it next year. You don't have any life insurance, or maybe the company gets bought and this new company doesn't offer it.
Yeah.
Even like the way it works is the premium is typically age banded. So it'll be something from the age of like 30 to 35, and then it goes up from 35 to 40 and so on. What we know is that if you can get a good health rating and you lock in like a 20-year term, you'll actually pay less over time than if you would with this. So many reasons to own an individual life insurance policy rather than just group.
And so when you have that, like, and so the thing that Dan and I learned, which I didn't really realize, is that when Michael and his wife came to the class, they were both expecting, we still had our classes down in Soho. Like I could even tell you where they were sitting. And I think because I was still like a new business-ish, and I was still kind of learning the ropes, and I had just started working with Dan, I think that it really made a very big impact on us. And what I realized was not saying that Dan, not saying that I didn't realize what you did, but I didn't realize having somebody like you in our corner, how much more that brings to your family than just somebody that's helping you get some paperwork in order. Like, I think you really, but like, honestly, from that time and time again, I mean, I could laugh at some of the stupid things that we've been through with Twiniversity families, but it's really like, I joke that I say that everybody needs a guy and that you've been my guy. And it's just been really a very valuable life experience for me. And you know that I love you personally and professionally, but it's because you're so kind of entwined with my planning and my future, right? I always think that my future is going to be like me and John and the kids, when I realize that you've played a role in our future this whole time as well. So now, knowing that everything that happened with Michael and Eden, and like it was just a lot. And that's when I learned that, like, oh crap, that life insurance policy that you get through work is kind of pointless, God forbid, because what happened with Michael is that when he got sick, he had to do treatments and chemo, and he did not have enough vacation time. So a lot of his fellow employees were donating time to him so that he could stay on, the company's medical insurance in addition to having the life insurance benefit. But, good or bad, he outlived it. And so he ended up passing away with not a lot of structure in place. And that's when, you get that frying pan to the back of the head about how important these things are. And you don't really think that anything's going to happen to you, which is why we always say that it's a parenting plot twist, right? Like nobody wants anything to happen. We could expect that things are going to go wonderfully smoothly, and there's no reason why we should be living in fear every day. We just have to do our best. But God forbid, something happens, you want to know that your family was protected. and that you were protected, even if it is just having enough money for, your final arrangements, as horrible as that is to say. But if there's something you want to be scattered on the beach in Tahiti, like, we need money for that, right? So with all of that being said, there's the two different types of
Yeah.
policies. There's kind of this term and this whole. So explain to us what those are and how do you know which one is going to be better for you?
Yeah, good. So yeah, there's basically two types. There's temporary insurance, which is mainly term insurance, which we
Mhm.
talked about, get them in increments of time. In all likelihood, most people outlive that term insurance. It's the least expensive, it's the least outlay to get the most benefit, but it's sort
Mhm.
of like renting, right? Like
Yeah.
it's very unlikely that it's going to pay out, and that's a good thing because you're going to live a long life. Then there is permanent insurance, and permanent insurance is meant to be there forever. In the realm of permanent life insurance, there are different types. And by the way, this is where you kind of say, like, I wasn't taught about this in school, and you feel like everyone knows about this. Nobody does. It's confusing. Life insurance, a black hole. We've all heard of universal and this, and who knows all these different types, which is why it's really important to work with somebody and get properly educated in this area. But when it comes to permanent insurance, there's a couple types. There's something called universal, there's something called variable, there's even now something called equity index universal. I'm not going to get into, we could have a whole seminar just on the types of life insurance. The life insurance that I typically recommend and use with my clients is whole life insurance. Whole life insurance has been around for 200 years, at least 200 years, hasn't changed all that much, but I like it because it has the most guarantees and I know it works. And
Mhm.
what it basically says is you're going to contribute an amount. There's going to be an amount that you accumulate that you can use called cash value. It's a liquid asset. It must grow just like a hockey stick shaped compounding curve. So there's no volatility. It's separate from the stock market. It's a safe money asset. There's a lot of tax advantages to it. It's liquid. You could use it throughout your life. And there's a guaranteed death benefit,
Mhm.
permanent death benefit, which will start out, it actually gets bigger as time goes on. And that can be very valuable later on in life when we start talking about retirement planning. So, in a lot of the conversations of understanding, well, what should I have?
Mhm.
It comes down to a little bit more of a savings plan, right? Because again, we're talking about protection, but I need to understand, hey, we got things to save for. We have college, we've got retirement, we maybe want to buy a house. So a lot of the way I'm looking at this is how are we saving our money? And we want to have risky assets, we want to have
Mhm.
safe assets. And a lot of the way I figure out, well, what should the allocation towards whole life be is a function of your savings rate, how much you're saving. And we might say is maybe we want 25 or 30% to go to this safe money asset, which
Mhm.
now leaves room to save in other places. So based on that savings amount, we'll say, okay, well, that gets X amount of death benefit. It's great, but this isn't enough if God forbid something should happen. And
Okay.
many times we'll fill it in with some term insurance. So many of my clients, including myself, we have a combination of permanent insurance and temporary insurance. Permanent insurance, great place to save, a lot of long-term value, strategic value, ways you could use it to pay for college. Term insurance protection, God forbid something happens in the short term.
Okay. All right. So, and that would be something that you would discuss during that initial meeting to figure out what was best for that. Or is it always dependent on the finances of it? Right? Because like if the whole life was 27 bazillion dollars, but the temporary one is $2,000, is that how you determine? Or do you say, well, what do you want to do?
No, I mean, look, people are coming to me for help and they're trusting me. So I need to understand everything that's going on in the world. I need to understand their cash flow. I need to understand how their cash flow works
Mhm.
before I even start talking about types of life insurance and what they should do. Okay. I need to know this makes sense for you. This is what I would do if I were in
Yeah.
your situation. And then there's a full education, maybe too much of an education, but I want to make sure you know why you're doing this. You understand the value it's going to have throughout your life. And then then, then we have a plan of we're going to do X into this and X into this, and they completely understand why, they're excited about it. It makes sense to them. And
Yeah.
then we're implementing it.
Yeah.
And then it's not over. You have to, we're still meeting. I mean, things change. And also look, many times I can't do that much whole life insurance right now. So we'll get some term insurance. Well, you can turn some of that term insurance into more whole life in time. So we're always kind of looking, like the goal is ideally for all of your insurance to be permanent at some
Yeah.
point. But it's, it has to make economic sense. It depends on your financial world, all those things. So, I work with my clients for many, many years. It's not like one and done. It's a long-term relationship, always sort of checking in and seeing where life is at.
Dan, if let's say today I make $35 a year, right? If I next year do something insane and now I'm making $400 million a year, am I able to change the amount that I have of life insurance? Even if I had whole life insurance and I've been paying into that for 10 years and then something wonderful happens, I get a giant promotion at work. Is that always fluid? Like, is that something that can be changed, or are you stuck with whatever you chose to?
You can change the type if you have convertible term insurance. So you can turn your term insurance into whole life. You never have to go through underwriting. You're automatically approved for it at the health rating you got when you got the term insurance.
Okay.
If you want more insurance, you want to add more, you would typically have to go through underwriting again.
Okay.
The insurance company has to assess the risk again. So if you want more amount.
All right. All right. So now we have that. The next thing that I really do want to talk about is I want to talk about wills. I think that this is a big, big, big topic that is the elephant in every family's room that doesn't have one. And if any of you out there have unfortunately dealt with a family member passing away without a will, you might know what an absolute pain in the butt that is. And then there's even people who did have a will, but weren't very explicit on what happened. There's so many things that could go into a will. And one thing that, like, when we first sat down and I first sat down with Ken, like, yes, of course, you're talking about your kids. But one of the things that I talk about at every Twiniversity class, usually after you leave, Dan, is I say that you don't have to name your children, that it just says your children. So a will is something that we could do at some point in our life, but depending on whether we have twins or twins plus 6, we don't have to go back and modify it because it just says children, unless of course we want to. So it's a document that can be alive and we can change it as much or as little as we like. So when you work with a new family, where do you prioritize the getting the will? Like, is it up there with life insurance? Is it like, how high on the list of things that you need to do is it?
It's right there with life insurance. Certainly if you have children. If you have children, it's a priority, right? Okay, I'll go through pretty quickly what you need to know about creating a will, right? A will isn't really for you. It's for the people that are going to be left behind. And there's sort of 2 categories of decisions. There's what if something just happens to you, but what if something happens to both you and your spouse? Okay, and that's the big one. So couple decisions you're going to need to make when creating a will. Okay, so you and your spouse are gone. Number 1 is who's taking care of your children. That is the guardian. So this is the person whose sole responsibility is to raise your children the way you would want them to be, the same values, the same religious beliefs, all of those things. Okay, you want to name one person, not a couple. Divorces happen, things happen. So you want to name one person. You want to ideally them to be in your age range. You can name a parent. It's not ideal, 7-year-old taking care of a teenager, but you want to have a single, you want to name one person. You want to be in our age range. You also want to have a backup, right? So you want to have a primary and you want to have a backup, right? By the way, this is probably the biggest reason why people don't get their wills done, is just deciding who this person should be. But if you got this one, the rest of the decisions are easy. So the guardian is number 1. Number 2 is the trustee. This is the person who's responsible for the finances of your children. Okay. You want somebody who's responsible, somebody who has some financial sense. They're going to be in charge of when your children need things, making sure there's money there. You know, they want a car, they're going to get money for a Honda, not a Porsche, right? But they're also going to be in charge of how that money is grown and how it's invested. So here's where life insurance comes into play. The more money, the more conservative they can be with it. They don't need to shoot the moon to it's there for your kids. So, you know, they're gonna manage that money. It can be the same person as the guardian, the trustee, and it can be the same. It can be different. There's sort of pros and cons to each. It depends. But, you know, it shouldn't interfere with raising your children. If the person you want to raise your children is just not financially savvy or have resources to financially savvy people, they probably should not be the trustee. Okay. The executor is the third job. This is at the time of death. Everything that should happen as far as dealing with probate, settling your estate, paying attorney fees, even funeral costs, that's their job. So again, somebody responsible. This is the one job it's often recommended should not be the same as the guardian. It's a devastating time for your children. You don't necessarily want the person who is raising your children and now in charge of them to be dealing with the headaches of settling an estate. So that should be different. I'll keep going here until you stop me, Nat. But
I want to stop you right now. Is it something that we should be talking to our parents about? Because this is it's multi-level, right? Like if we have parents and even if they have a house and you have 10 siblings, like to me, I find that yes, I'm judgmental, but like if my parents don't have a will, right? Because my parents didn't have a will until I got a will. So the same week that John and I got ours is the same week that I took my parents to get theirs. And I thought that was so interesting because I just had assumed that like that was like most adults did things like that, but it really bothered me that they didn't. And so I think honestly, it's a worthy conversation to have with grandparents as well, especially if they're like, well, now I have this and I have this, and you have, you never know who's coming out of the woodwork to say, oh, she said this to me and she said that. If there's no documents to prove any of that, it's really something interesting.
A will makes everyone's lives easier who has to handle this, right? Like without a will, it'll get settled, but you're going through probate court, which is a fun experience, depending on the state. No fun, you're dealing with judges.
You're in mortal for the reason why you're doing this in the first place, and then you have to deal with all of that. It's a lot.
Everything is public. It takes a very long time for an estate to settle. So a will and other legal documents streamlines all of that. So absolutely reasons you should have it. Other documents that go along with a will: healthcare proxy, living will, power of attorney. You're going to get these done also. These are situations where you don't die, but you're incapacitated, where you can't make these decisions. So you're clearly defining who will make health decisions on your behalf, who will make financial decisions on your behalf. You want to get these documents done along with your will. Other things to think about of if you're gone, when should your children receive the money? Right. So right now, without a will, all the money goes into a court-appointed trust. When they turn 18, they get a check, right? Which is not a great situation for a young person who lost both their parents at an early age, and now they're 18 and they're getting this money. So you will oftentimes, there's two ways to do this. You can have distribution ages in a will. Many times people will say, okay, at the age of 30, you get 33%. At 35, you get 33%. At age 40, you get 33%. It can really be whatever you want it to be. There's also ways where they never outright get the money and it goes into a trust. And there's a lot of benefits to that. Any money that's put in a trust is a good thing. It's protected from creditors. It's protected against divorce. What if they get divorced? It's protected against taxes, estate taxes. So, and there's ways to take income from trusts, right? Things like that. Important for children, but even what if you pass away and your spouse marries someone else? and maybe they have kids, or maybe they had kids, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't work out with them, but all of your money is now commingled. So a
Mhm.
trust you can create. This is my money. It's meant for my children. It can give my wife or spouse income, right?
Yeah.
But it's protecting that money. So these are sort of the conversations around trusts and estate planning documents.
It was a very fascinating conversation to go through that whole process, and even just the power of attorney and the proxy. And it just, I know that we have everything on copy at the lawyer's office. And when my dad wasn't doing so well and we needed copies of that stuff, it was just so magnificent to just email somebody and say, listen, I need this power of attorney right now. And because luckily he is unbelievably organized, literally we had it probably within an hour. And it was crucial at that time. And I'm so thankful that you and your crew, the circle of people that surround you, and it's just unbelievable. And it's an invaluable experience to have, but everybody just looks the other way, or they put their head in the sand and they're like, okay, we'll do this next year. Okay, this is something that we have to do. But I will tell you, for all of you that are here now, it is such a relief knowing that these things are done and that they're done correctly. And it has nothing to do with me. I didn't do any of that for me, right? God forbid something happens and my life insurance is used. I am not here to worry about that, right? So I could also say, like, what does it matter? I'm not going to be there. What is it? What do I care what it says in the will? What do I care how much life insurance I'm going to have? But I just want what's right for my kids. And I want to always protect them. And as somebody who does work full time, that's a big deal. I don't want to leave that all to John, just hanging out there. I think there's better ways that we could be adults. And I think this is one of those critical things that happen. And I know, especially when we have littles or we're pregnant, we're worried about all the stuff. This is the stuff, honestly, you guys really need to worry about. Like, for real, I can't express to you enough how important it is to make sure that these ducks are in a row, whether it's just your life insurance, whether it's your will, whether it's just the healthcare proxy, that God forbid you went to go get a root canal and something happened and now you had an abscess and now you're unconscious in a hospital. I need somebody that I'm going to trust making decisions for me. That's not my sister, because she will do everything by like emotion and not care what I really wanted in any discussions that we've ever had. Like, it's so important. And I remember when my twins turned 18, I thought, like, oh, it's not going to matter now. Like, we made it to the point of like who was going to be, their caretaker. Like, once they got big enough, it was so interesting that that was something that John and I had kind of not argued about, but disagreed about for a long time, of who would take care of the kids if God forbid something happened. And then as soon as they turned 18, I was like, all that fighting was for nothing. We didn't even need to worry about it. They did so well. But it's just to make sure that you have that stuff done. So Dan, I
Yeah.
know that we're closing up on our time here, but what do we do now? Right? We know this information. We have kind of a fairly good understanding of things that we have in our control, that these decisions we can make. What do we do today?
Yeah, well, good. A good way to end. Look, that's what I do. Is my job is to create peace of mind around people's finances so that they could be thinking about their job, they could be thinking about their kids, knowing that their finances are set up. But it takes a little bit of conversation.
Mhm.
Ideally, work if it's not me, work with somebody. You want to set up an appointment, have an initial conversation, get the process started. One of the things we'll often talk about is there's a difference between important and urgent, right?
Mhm.
When does something switch from being important to urgent? Sometimes a lot of these things are in the category of important. Like, I know I need to do that. I got to get to it at some point. But the reality is it can become urgent
Yeah.
tomorrow. You just don't know when,
Yeah.
right? Like, what has to happen for this now to switch to be urgent? That's why when you need this stuff, you can't get it. So the time to get it is when you don't need it. So yes, I'm happy to have a conversation. I work with everyone. It doesn't matter your
Mhm.
situation. I don't charge any planning fee or anything like that. If you'd like to have a conversation, by all means, I know you're going to send me some emails, so I'll get emails out to see if anyone wants to speak. I think there's a scheduling link up there if I'm
Yep.
not confused.
Nope, we have it right now. So if you guys want to talk with Dan and I would recommend that you and your partner do it together, that even that first initial meeting, I think it's pretty important to do as a team, because this is something you have to do as a team, right? If you do have a partner, if you're married, if you have, or have a common law partner, you do need to do this as a family, because we don't want to have conversations where we're sitting with a lawyer and all of a sudden somebody says, I didn't know that. I didn't know like this. Let's not have any surprises. So you could click the QR code that is below us. You can't click it. You actually have to use your camera, or you could do a screenshot, but we're going to send you an email with it anyway later. So you'll have that. But how long does the process take, Dan? From like the first time that we meet with you until I could sleep better at night, knowing I have a life insurance policy and my will in place. What does that timeline look like? Like, is it something that can be done in a week if we're like, I have a lot of anxiety, I just want to get this done? Can it be, or is this a process that takes, a couple weeks or maybe even a couple months?
It depends, right? There's some factors that are out of our control, right?
Mhm.
Certainly like getting life insurance, like doctor reports and things like that.
Yeah.
But my job is to try and create as much efficiency, get this done as quickly as possible. But everyone's in a different situation. Everyone's got different life circumstances. It all really depends. Sometimes it can take a couple weeks. Sometimes it takes a month or two. And the reality is once it's even done, it doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
Life is full of curveballs. Things are always happening. So it's a maintaining a relationship, checking in and having conversations as time goes on.
Well, Dan, thank you very, very, very much. And I am happy that you let me share you with the entire Twiniversity universe. And I know weirdly, I don't think you expected to work with the majority of twin families that you do, but that was an unforeseen plot twist in your
Yeah,
career. But everything
love it.
happens for a reason. And I don't think I would sleep as well at night without you. So you've done a lot for me and my family, and genuinely, and those of you that know me from Twiniversity, I am as straight of a shooter as I possibly get. But in all sincerity, if this is something that you did not do, you have to just get this done. All right, guys. So promise me, everybody out there, pinky promise. That's what we get done. All right, Dan, they're going to call you. You're going to call them too. But thank you very, very, very much for playing with us today and for dealing with my insanity for the past decade plus.
I love it, Nat. Thank you.
All right,
Appreciate it.
guys. So if you guys have questions for us too, we're going to send you an email since you're registered for this, but you could always email us at community@twiniversity.com if you have any additional questions. All right, guys, until next time, see you later, alligators. Thanks for joining.